When I talk to people, most know that housing costs have become unaffordable for many American households. And as I understand, since 2020, many countries have experienced housing inflation along with the US. But contrary to what you may believe, a surprising amount of people have no idea what the drivers are to housing inflation or the housing market cycle. In this video, I will talk about some factors that have led up to the current housing crisis, as well as show you some very interesting data that has recently been published by the Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard University. Welcome back, and if you're new to our channel, it's a great time to introduce you to Sachs Realty. I'm Todd Sachs, and I'm a real estate broker in Maryland, and I have dedicated my entire career of over 30 years to serving the housing industry in one aspect or another. Our channel is dedicated to keep our audience informed on anything and everything real estate. There are several drivers that cause home prices to rise and fall. Historically, we call this the real estate cycle. But before we can talk about where we are today, we need to understand that there are four primary phases to the real estate cycle: recovery, expansion, hypersupply, and recession. And throughout time, the entire real estate cycle in the US typically takes about 18 years to come full circle. So let's break this down so that you not only understand the cycle of real estate, but how the cycles affect the cost of housing. So first up, let's talk about recovery. Discovering when real estate enters the recovery phase is actually one of the hardest phases to identify. Usually when we're entering this phase, we've experienced a recession, and the overall economic outlook could look bleak. Rental prices typically flatten out, new construction of homes almost completely halts, and home prices can fall below market value. Home prices falling in the recovery stage are usually due to homeowners experiencing major financial hardship and very distressed property conditions. The next phase is expansion. This phase typically begins as consumer confidence returns. The overall economy is seen to be healthy, jobs are stable, and wage growth increases. This positive upward swing in confidence begins a period of financial growth. In this phase is where we see the most real estate appreciation. Then next comes hypersupply. This is the phase that I believe in the real estate cycle we're in right now. Due to the improved confidence of the expansion phase, investors and homeowners battle it out on the purchase of real estate. This raises real estate prices to a newer tipping point. Then comes this hypersupply phase. This is where either a glut of inventory hits the market from overbuilding, or possibly some economic shift occurs that shakes our economy and destroys consumer confidence. This phase typically causes rippling effects in everything, including interest rates, higher unemployment, the depletion of savings accounts, and so much more. Finally, this goes on to create the fourth phase, which is recession. Now, according to economists and the Fed, a recession is defined in the US as 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. In the recession phase of real estate, we know we're here when we see supply increase, properties remain on the market for extended periods of time, apartment vacancies begin to increase, landlords offer lower rents and increase incentives to attract tenants, and sellers reduce the prices of their homes to meet the demands of the more financially burdened buyers. So now that you have a better understanding of the cycle of real estate and the four main phases, as promised, I want to show you some data that is published on Harvard University's Joint Centers for Housing Studies website, as I feel that this is one of the most believable, well-performed studies I've seen so far this year. I want to show you some of their map outlines. And by the way, I have dropped a link to their website in the details section below. Please check this out if you'd like to do a deeper dive into their research. Let's take a look at this map that they published based on April's data of earlier this year. This map shows 500 of the US major markets throughout the country and how much money one household needs to make in order to afford a medium-priced home. And by the way, I think around April of this year is when we experienced the tipping point that began to push us into the now hypersupply phase of the real estate cycle. Now let's take a look at this map. So just as a reminder, guys, most of a buyer's income goes to housing-related expenses when owning a home. This map indicates areas of the U.S., the amount of annual income needed to buy a median-priced home as of April of this year. And as we're about to see, it widely varies depending on the market. Let's focus on the areas of the most rapid growth in this real estate cycle. Here, indicated in yellow, is where income needed to buy a median-priced home in these markets exceeds $100,000 per year. In my area, the DMV, including West Virginia, income required to purchase a median-priced home was determined to be $152,740. And as you can see here in Florida, most major markets required more than $100,000 in income. Actually, most of the Eastern Seaboard required the same. And as we go to the Western markets, from Colorado west, household incomes required to buy a median-priced home varied from over $100,000 annually to more than $200,000 in areas like Seattle, Tacoma, and Bellevue in Washington state. And most of the Southwest California and areas like Santa Maria, Santa Barbara, California required income of almost $270,000 a year to afford a median-priced home. And just a reminder, I dropped that link below so you could check out your own state if you care to do so. One of the reasons why I like this data so much is that, in my opinion, it's one of the most realistic studies that I've seen this far. For instance, this considers buyers with 3.5% down, a 30-year fixed mortgage rate with 0 points, and a mortgage interest rate of 4.98%. They also considered averages on additional factors such as mortgage insurance, property insurance, and property taxes. Now, let's take a look at this other map because in this current real estate cycle, it appears that many of the areas of our country that experienced the most rapid price acceleration year over year was somewhat related to domestic migration. Now, maybe some of it had to do with pandemic-related situations or states that were the least affordable to live. But regardless, there was a lot of similarity in people relocating to other states within our country. So in this map that highlights migration and population change, I want to bring your attention to the states that experienced the highest exodus, as well as the states with the largest population growth. You have the option in this interactive map to change the types of migration. But for the purposes of this video, I am focusing solely on domestic migration. States with the highest population growth during the 2021 study period were Arizona, Texas, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, with the highest domestic migration of more than 220,000 people. And the states with the most people exiting during the same time period include California with more than 360,000 people, Illinois with more than 122,000, and the smaller state between the three, New York, had the most people exit the state per capita as 352,000 people left their state. And finally, let's take a look at the map that's titled Renters Were Particularly Burdened in the First Year of the Pandemic. In these areas in the country, as we were leading up to the pandemic in 2019, this map shows where renters were experiencing high housing costs in comparison to their incomes. In this map, it's easy to see that for many years now, high percentages of renters have felt the financial pain of much of their income going towards the roof over their head. The large areas blanketing most of the U.S. indicates that as of this study, over 40% of American households are burdened throughout the country with the high cost of housing. Florida during this time period showed the highest percentage, with over 53% of renter households experiencing housing cost burdens. So as you can see, there are so many factors that affect the housing market as far as our pricing and affordability as we travel throughout the various 4 phases of the real estate cycle. The good news, guys, is throughout time, these cycles are very predictable. And during all economic downturns, we always have a brighter side on the other end. Thank you for your time in watching this video. And if you found value, if you'd hit that thumbs up, it'll let me know that you did. And if you haven't already done so because you're new or you just haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe button and smash the alert bell. It'll let you know every time I upload real estate content just like this. See you next time.
Sachs Realty, Maryland broker number 607720, office number 443-318-4514, equal housing opportunity.